Hey, this is Tim with All Things Recruiting, a channel tailored for manufacturing professionals who are busier than a squirrel in a nut factory to come whenever they hear me holler. Let me show you something you might not know. Hey, I like my acronym and my mostly whiteboard. No time to waste. Let's get after it. So, number one. Let's make a deal. If I'm able to present to you the topic of how to get more offers accepted in a drastically different type of way, so let's go ahead and define that as A, I give you information you have never seen before, and B, I give you ideas on how to think of the recruiting process that are brand spanking new to you. So come to think of it, the stakes are pretty high for me, right? So if I accomplish that, all you gotta do is hit subscribe, hit that bell, check out the information I leave for you down in the description section so you can know how to get access to my future content before your competitors do in this great battle for talent. So, number two, jumping right into it. I am going to attempt to draw dials with different settings, and I am purposely making them smaller and smaller. And what I want you to do is to imagine that these dials are the control settings on the manufacturing equipment inside of your facility that are making parts, right? So take a second to literally imagine what is happening in your plant. You are making parts or a product. That product goes through a process, perhaps is long and complex. At the end of the day, if the ratio of good to bad parts is good enough, your customer to whom you send the parts is happy, and then they pay you money. So if an organization desires to figure out how to get more offers accepted, the recruiting process must be seen the same exact way, and honestly, it really is. So imagine that this is your piece of equipment in your plant, and these are all perfectly in tune. You are meeting spec on a very good number of parts per million, and you move just one. What's gonna happen? If these three are still perfectly in tune, either you're gonna make all bad parts, or you're gonna drastically and negatively affect the parts per million of good parts. So the recruiting process is slightly different in so much that the steps at the beginning are more important in order to have a high ratio of accepted to declined offers. Because all the work you put up front sets up success for the other three, and the smaller amount that you move this, the greater effect it has on everything else down the line. So let's imagine this last dial might represent something to the effect of the amount of stretch wrap that goes on top of your palletized product at the end of the line when your product's already made, getting ready to go to your customer. And this is dwarfed in level of importance by this big dial here. So let's call that, for example, if you are melting anything to make your product, this is the formula of the material makeup, or in the assembly process, this could represent something like correct labeling of parts to reduce human error as they are quickly assembling things they can just grab and go. So the big dial, the most important, small dial, the least important. So here is why I made that deal with you under very high stakes. Well, first off, I already know I'm gonna meet my end of the deal, but second, the reason why I know that I'm gonna meet my end of the deal is 95% or so of the material that you're ever gonna see on how to get more offers accepted is represented by this last dial. Everything, or almost everything that you've seen, is dwarfed into comparison of what happens earlier into the recruiting process. So that's why it's really important to view the recruiting process as such. You move one dial, you get more bad parts. So let's go ahead and label these parts so I can perhaps prove my point. Let's name this one negotiating. And negotiating can include things such as wining and dining a candidate for very high level positions, or it can include how to present an offer, how to avoid counter offers, things to that effect. Again, go ahead and Google it. It's going to be the vast majority of information that you see. And I'm telling you right now, that is the fourth dial, by far the least important. So thinking with the end in mind, because there are no easy answers as to how to get your offer accepted, this is going to be a 4-part series. So we're going to go ahead and at least label each 4, although this video is only going to cover in depth this first dial. So let's go ahead and label this one, has anything changed? And the way we should view this third dial is, so I want you to imagine your point of contact at your company, and we're imagining the internal recruitment process, no third-party recruiters. This third dial represents, perhaps quite literally, that person asking the candidate multiple times throughout the recruitment process, perhaps every time that there's a touch point with the candidate, has anything changed? So in a nutshell, what the person is looking for is, have you started interviewing anywhere else? Have you received any offers? And perhaps most importantly and most common, you need to fish out if that candidate, now that he or she is farther along in the process, is attempting to use leverage because now it's clear that you have more interest in the candidate to up the amount of money that they said they needed at the beginning. So the point of this third dial is to essentially lock in expectations that are hopefully set at the beginning in these first two dials. That's the point of the third one. And let's label this second one the push and pull. And it's sort of kind of got a bonus topic of salt in wound. So what we're going to imagine here is, for the push and pull, the candidate's motivation. And this will be covered more in depth in the next video, but just to give you a little teaser here, the motivation that any candidate has when they are interviewing at your company or any company has two parts. So first off, ask yourself, when I'm fishing out why is this person interviewing with us, do I view that as two major parts? So what I have come to learn and observed among a lot of people is that they are only analyzing the push. Why are you looking for work here pertaining to your current situation, such as you're unemployed, that's a pretty big push, or your plant is going to close, or the children of the owners are taking over the company and you're not liking what's going on. That is typically what is analyzed as the motivation, but really it is not the whole motivation. You also have a pull, and we can envision the pull as, let's just call it company appeal, or the appeal to the company that the candidate has. So this gets really, really complex, and it goes way in depth, and it is an extremely important element in regards to setting the dial correct in order to get more parts per million down the line for your customers. But in a nutshell, the push and pull, they can have different strengths applied to them. So let's imagine, since we're working with two parts, a magnet. They have two poles, P-O-L-E, not P-U-L-L, but they have two poles. And in order to get a really good connection here that sticks hard, is the poles not only have to be oriented in the correct direction to each other to stick, but the strength of those two magnetic poles has to be strong enough for this connection to be very durable. And salt in the wound is a recruiting tool used in later points of the process to essentially remind the candidate of their pain point, their push. Why are they looking for work? But not only do you utilize it in that fashion, but you're attempting, at least during the negotiating part, to really rub salt in that wound. And during the has anything changed period, what this salt in the wound represents is that you've used that time to further analyze with the candidate not only the real reasons behind why they're looking, however, to specifically compare it to how other opportunities alleviate or heal that wound that they have, so that you can have all the tools you can for a really good candidate to show that your opportunity truly is better than those other opportunities that they have available to them. And this last and biggest dial is called sort the bag. And I'm going to erase the board so we have more room to really deep dive into this, but I want you to remember that this is the biggest dial, and not only is it the biggest dial with the largest circumference, it has the most possible settings available. It's really difficult to hone this dial into the correct setting. You can think it's pointing towards the right one, but it could be off just a little bit, and that will affect the ratio of good parts that you produce down at the end of the line. So let's jump into sorting the bag. We got sort the bag for number 3. All sorts of acronyms up here. So the way we're going to visualize this starting out is, well, with the bag. And this bag has all sorts of different shapes in it. And What we have next is that type of baby toy that has the different holes or shapes in it through which a baby is tasked with pushing the correct shape through. What we have over here is your internal or external talent acquisition or recruitment, and over here is you have your hiring managers. So not being the reason why this is the most important dial, rather why this is the hardest by far to set and get in tune to make good parts, is because of the interplay among different groups of people, different people, the communication breakdown that happens. So let's imagine this in your facility. Let's say you have a foreign parent company. You have language barriers, literally time zone differences that could be 12 hours apart. You know, if your parent company is in Japan, you can have their groups not understanding how your plant in the Americas does business, how your manufacturing capabilities are set up, the goals that your production crew really need in order to meet the goals set by the parent company, what you need done by the design group so you can meet those goals. So let's take example, you're building cars. Your group really wants to be able to spot weld more because you can increase tack time like that per the demands of the parent company, but the design group over there is not truly honing in on the concept of why this is so important for production, because it's so much easier for them to design the body of the car that includes, 10 to 40% MIG welding or some type of welding that's slower and more expensive. And therefore, it makes it tougher and tougher for the production group to meet the demands of that group. So there's a lot of breakdown, or you can take it more at the beginning of your process, since this is the first dial at the beginning of the process. Let's take your procurement group, for example, and let's make the base assumption that they are doing their jobs absolutely perfectly. But think about it, they still have incredible challenges to face, mainly due to the interplay of communication across different groups, different people, perhaps different languages. So for a specific example, their routine business model is to procure parts 3 years before the supposed launch date of said new product. And a year before the product launch, they catch wind that the customer is saying something to the effect of, oh, we can only give you 100,000 parts per quarter instead of 250,000. The task that they take on at that point is incredibly challenging, even though they had done their jobs perfectly, again, because of so many groups in play. And the recruiting process is exactly the same. No matter how well, let's say just one group, let's say the internal recruiter or external recruiter is doing their jobs perfectly, there are challenges here. Or vice versa. Let's say the hiring manager is working with a brand spanking new recruiter in your facility and they are doing everything perfectly, but there are challenges here, specifically pertaining to the communication between these two groups. Not all of the reasons why this sort the bag process is broken down is attributed to communication interplay, and the first one we're going to start off with is one of those. However, I want to give you the main idea of sort the bag. So in sort the bag, the talent acquisition team is tasked with identifying first, what shape are we aiming for? And that requires information from the hiring managers. However, what they're supposed to do is take that information and utilize their past experiences to eliminate the shapes that don't fit. So in this example, we are shooting for circles. And the main idea is that the talent acquisition team does all of the upfront work for identifying all the circles before giving that bag that only has circles in it to the hiring team. So let me show you why the sort the bag process is so incredibly important. So let's take one hiring manager who is accustomed to receiving all the resumes. They do the sorting the bag themselves. They are the ones who send that to the talent acquisition team in order to call the folks. So at front, and I imagine this happens at a lot of people's plants because I've seen it done before, it looks great because the talent acquisition team is already certain that, hey, this is a good resume. But here is the major problem with it, actually two major problems with it. First, you don't just have one hiring manager at your organization. How many plants do you have in the United States and or globally? Well, how many hiring managers is that now? So let's just take 300 hiring managers all in one room, and you not just have a bag, but you have a monster bag that is 300 times the volume with a ton more parts. And it's so big that now those 300 managers have to empty the bag out, and you have 300 people scrambling on the floor looking for circles. how expensive is hiring manager time? It is precious. It has a lot of labor dollars. So to contrast that, what they should be doing is receiving a bag full of circles so they can sit there and go, boom, boom, in that baby toy, slam dunk in hires. But not only that, they don't even need to look in the bag. They can reach in blindly and having a merry old little time to the point that they take 5 steps back to try to shoot 3-pointers through it because the process is so amazing now. In essence, they can hire any one of those that they want with a high probability that that person will accept the offer. So that's one reason. Another reason why hiring managers doing the sorting the bag is because, let's say, they send great people on paper and they really like that skill set, so they expect them to set up an interview with the hiring manager, and if they don't, they do need an explanation. Well, it's completely possible, and I've been in this situation before, because the talent acquisition team is the person who is responsible, who is the professional dial setter for all the other items in the process. And let's say the candidate lives 70 miles south of you, and assuming they drive to your plant, there is a major city there and your plant is outside of it. Hiring manager not being a professional dial setter in the recruiting process, they might not see the monstrous risk that if you hire that person, they're passing a major city every day to work. They're just going to find a job at that city if it's only 20 minutes away as opposed to an hour and 10 minutes. And so that's another reason is that the hiring managers, if they are doing this process in reverse, they have that base expectation, and they might not agree with the talent acquisition team, who is the professional dial setters, and they want to talk to them anyway. And then over time, spread across a bunch of hiring managers, you end up hiring people who leave your organization within a year because the hiring manager is setting the rest of the dials, or setting one dial up front wrong, and the recruiter is responsible for trying to set the rest of them right, but it doesn't matter. The process is already messed up. You're getting more bad parts at the end of the line. Okay, so let's wrap this video up with 4 quick examples, and then the next video will be about the second dial. So 1, don't massage candidates. And let's define massaging as looking at those squares and saying to yourself, or as an organization culturally, hey, we can shave off those corners by inviting them into the facility, allowing them to meet the hiring team, how amazing the projects that we're looking forward to really are, and hopefully by the end of the process, those corners will be shaved so that we can fit them through this hole. Well, I'm here to tell you that candidates are like salamanders. If you cut something off, it is gonna grow back once they're there. Things will fester. So this could be a money thing where you invite somebody knowing good and well they're $20,000 over your pay range, but during the conversation, hopefully that happens at the beginning in the first dial about compensation, your point of contact says something to the effect of, okay, Mr. Candidate, thanks for letting me know whereabouts you are compensation-wise. I am very confident that if you are selected for this opportunity that we can put together a competitive package for you. No. Let's say you do get them enamored with the situation and they do accept an offer. When they start paying their bills, and let's say they have a family and a spouse and all that stuff's gonna set in, and you're setting yourself up for somebody leaving you after a year. And that is the worst case scenario because you will have invested a bunch of time, not just the interview process, but an entire year getting that person up to speed, and they're still not autonomous. So the ROI is completely negative still, and they leave you. And you're left with 0 time with a fully autonomous individual producing profit for the company directly or indirectly. It's a bad situation. So that's one form of massaging. Another form of massaging can come in form of motivation. Let's say that the candidate, very common one by the way, the candidate is very focused on wanting a clear career path because they lack that there. Maybe they have a glass ceiling, maybe they don't, but they simply don't like that the development of one's career at the company doesn't exist. I've seen all too commonly that the point of contact says, oh yeah, we can do this and that, when in fact, it really just depends on both performance and is there actually somebody retiring or leaving. That you cannot guarantee or step through a process where you are creating a whole bunch of different titles. For example, General Motors has an amazing program where If you looked on their LinkedIn profiles, they are going through totally different types of titles. So if your company doesn't have that, don't sell them if that is their motivation, because they are a salamander. If you cut off their corners and they get to your organization and you have elaborated or exaggerated really the career development or the path set for the candidates, and they get in the mix and say, oh, I just left that company and the same thing is here, well, guess what? They're out. And that's the worst case scenario, to have somebody stay for a little bit, having invested tons of time, and now they're gone because you massaged the situation. All right, so number 2 is dollars make sense. And I'm spelling with a C just to be kind of cute here. So if there's any one specific element of this video that leaves more than half of you scratching your head in disbelief, it is going to be this one. But really, it's not going to be just disbelief. You are probably not going to want this to be true for one reason or another. And what I want to challenge you to do is just Google this at the end of the video, which hopefully I've held up my end of the deal. So you hit subscribe to the bell and check out the information down in the link. But anyway, what you'll want to do is Google something to the effect of recruiting. When do I discuss money? Or when to discuss money? And I can forewarn you that there are 2 types of responses or types of literature that you'll read. One is from the candidate perspective, so you'll have to filter those out. But from the employer perspective, what you're going to find is, unlike most topics where there is disagreement and you'll find information about both, on this topic, it's unanimous. As in, you literally might not find one piece of information that is in contrast to what I'm about to say. So, talking money at the beginning of the process is not just within that first of 4 dials, if you can imagine those again, but it happens in the very first conversation. And not only that, even more uncomfortably, it's one of the very, very, very first things that your point of contact should be doing and discussing in depth with your candidates each and every time. So that's why I gave you the forewarning that a lot of you might be scratching your heads. However, I have good news. I'll just explain how to do it right now, and it's going to make perfect sense, which you'll subscribe and hit the bell once again. So 2 reasons why this isn't happening inside of your organization. First is because being internal, you perceive a much greater weight of responsibility to mitigate litigation and risk of litigation, right? So even if one knows that talking money early in the process is right, it might be cultural and it might be a mandate from the VP of HR or whoever that this isn't done. We're going to do this later, right? So that's one area of breakdown. If that's the case, well, good luck to you figuring out how to do it the right way, because there are a lot of challenges. The second reason is simply just being unaware. I mean, if your internal talent acquisition team has never been a third-party recruiter who is exposed to very ruthless and constant feedback on how well they are setting their dials. So for example, ruthless being, if an external recruiter has their dials off, guess what happens? They're going to know it right away because they can't pay their bills. They're setting their dials gets them the ability to keep a roof over their head. And internally, the unawareness happens because it's totally possible that you are working hard and a lot of hard work is put into place, and therefore you're walking around with a peachy smile thinking everything's merry, but really your dials are all messed up. So it's simply a question of being unaware because you are not exposed to ruthless and instant and continuous feedback as third-party recruiters do. So those are 2 major reasons. But how do we do it? The way I do this is I start off every conversation by setting expectations with the candidate about how long we're going to be on the phone, what we're going to discuss, and specifically what order we're going to discuss it. So for example, hi Mr. Candidate, thanks for taking time out of your day to speak with me for about 20 minutes here. So what we're going to accomplish is 2 general topics. The first is feasibility. In a nutshell, what that means is we're going to make sure that this is worth your time to get into before we go into the details. And what we're going to do second is we'll go into the details of the job, answer any questions you might have, and take it from there. Sound good? And Mr. Candidate says, oh yep, that sounds good. So you set clear expectations without defining what the feasibility piece is. So the next thing that I talk about is geography. And there are 2 main ideas when you're talking geography with a candidate. First, per some of the obstacles that I mentioned earlier, your talent acquisition team or recruiter sincerely wants to get the raw information out in order to analyze the level of risk in investing time in the candidate through the interview process and or through having him or her be a new hire. However, during this geography conversation, the other main goal that the recruiter has is to develop some rapport. And sometimes this can be pretty challenging, especially if the candidate is 5 miles from the plant, there's not a lot to talk about. You move right on. So there are some instances where it's a little challenging, but you got to do it. So here's the thing. You have a little bit of time to build rapport before your talent acquisition team has to become a professionally trained ballerina who is dancing around a very sensitive topic with spikes that are on fire. So we're addressing the idea that a very sensitive topic is getting ready to come up. What can be done? Well, so far, we've got expectations and a little bit of rapport. The next tool in the bag that the recruiter can use is to create a picture in the person's mind that is not a ballerina dancing around flaming spikes. So what I do in this part of the conversation is, all right, Mr. Candidate, well, I have the personal philosophy that if my compensation playground is not the same or in direct proximity to your compensation playground, then we can't play ball, so we might as well figure it out at the beginning of the conversation before we talk details. Does that make sense? And what the candidate says is, yeah, that makes sense. So here's your major tool, though. Not only have you set expectations, built a little rapport, and created a nice visual for the candidate, but you got commitment that it makes sense. So that person is committed to talking compensation with you right then, right there. You see what I did there? You have 4 tools to your disposal in order to accomplish the task of talking dollars and cents at the beginning of the conversation. All right, so perhaps I have not explained why talent acquisition members need to talk about money, not just in the first conversation, but at the beginning of the first conversation. Well, it's extremely similar to what we did earlier with taking one hiring manager and multiplying that across the organization. First phone call with the person, and you talk about the role, right? How long does that take? Let's say 15 minutes. Then what happens next? The candidate starts asking questions about them. Then you're at 20 minutes already. So now the candidate's brain is really spinning about the role. What are they likely going to ask next? How much does the position pay? To which your talent acquisition person says, oh, it pays $80,000. The candidate says, oh, I'm at $105,000 right now. This is not going to happen because that's 40 miles away. A big pay cut. No, thank you. And you just wasted 20 minutes of time when it could have been done at the beginning of the conversation. That's why it is so important. Remember, multiply that out. That's why it is very important to do it at the very beginning of the conversation. Time is money. And let's say you're HR folks. You know that you are pulled in all sorts of directions. It's hard enough just to sit down for 10 seconds without people coming to you, right? So 20 minutes is really, really valuable, and you have to save it, and it has to be done at the beginning of the conversation for that reason. All right, so number 3 is hiring manager to HR missing pieces. You imagine how are requisitions made in your facility? Just think about it for a second. So let's say that the hiring manager is already busy enough, just like everybody else in a manufacturing facility, and they only have time to shoot over 6 bullet points down to talent acquisition. And then talent acquisition has the great responsibility of making a job description from that. I'm not sure how it goes down in your plant, but that's how I have actually seen it done before. And you have to essentially make up the rest. Can you go ahead and book that manager and sit down with him or her? Maybe, but how long does that take? It might be around Christmas and they expect you to post the job before then, and they're already on vacation by the time you receive the paper. So that in and of itself creates the situation that talent acquisition doesn't know what hole we're aiming for. There are missing puzzle pieces there. All right, and number 4 is also hiring manager to HR. Let's call this one Mulligan. So this comes in form of the situation, your plant has all job descriptions ready to go. And if that's the case, hallelujah, you should feel extremely thankful. It's not very common. But the big challenge to look out for when you have all of your job descriptions already made is that the hiring team sends it down to HR. HR gets going, posts the job, starts getting candidates, spends a considerable amount of time talking with candidates, setting appointments with them, not interviews, setting appointments, spending the time on the phone with them, vetting them, sending them to the hiring team. And let's say you're getting close to the holidays, well, then they're not looking at resumes during that time, right? So you get back from the holidays and a lot of time has been spent only to have the hiring manager go back to HR and go, oh, actually for this process engineering role, I need somebody with better material science background, because what's going to be happening is I need this person to liaise a little bit more with R&D so we can figure out manufacturability, tooling issues, and they need that processing background to assist the R&D with these challenges of the new product. But the requisition was based off what was more common is in that group, the missing talent dynamic was a mechanically minded person or somebody very process oriented. Let's say you extrude metals, whatever the process that you have, you just needed somebody who was a darn good process engineer with metal extrusion, regardless of their mechanical aptitude or metal material science background. And now you're left thinking, oh wait, I just spent a bunch of time hunting for circles, I needed triangles. That's a ton of wasted time. And once again, multiply that out across your organization, there is simply a ton of time wasted. That's the last thing I got for you today. So if I did accomplish my task, hit subscribe, bell, check out what I left for you down below, and we'll see you next time.